one of the things coming out recently that Tigrayan region is under siege for some time, and people are comparing this siege with like siege in Sarajevo, siege in Russia during the Second World War, or like siege in Madrid before the Second World War. But the intensity is much higher than those sieges happened. So we are talking about, it's not a town or city, it's a whole region. And that's kind of area lots of people are worried, and even like World Health Organization coming out with like serious warning that you need to do something about this. If you talk about the seas, it says like it's almost now going towards 500 days. How factual these facts are?
I agree to some extent with the such a narrative that Tigray as a region is under siege for quite some time. And I also came across some opinion piece on this regard, and including the claims of international community, including the World Health Organization. Of course, we have to be careful with the narratives. So before I go deep into the plausibility of those narratives, we need to approach every issue with a pinch of salt, which is the director of the World Health Organization is a executive member of the TPLF for long, and is still doing a double, by the way. Yeah, the Dr. Theodros is a member of the TPLF, and he used to be the leader, and is still one of the wings, the diaspora wing, advocating for the TPLF. At the same time, being the World Health Organization, we're supposed to be neutral, but at the same time, he's advocating for the cause of the TPLF, not the Tigrayan people. So this is just a caveat we need to make, or just keep in mind. That being said, as I've reflected time and again on the catastrophic humanitarian crisis and the need to provide humanitarian aid to Tigray and beyond. By the way, I know it is very serious. The war has been almost 19 or 20 months old now, and there is no significant. There are some rapprochement between the two parties, especially after the federal government declared the so-called humanitarian truce a month ago. There had been some improvement on the ground, but not sufficient. But in terms of security, the siege that the Western outlets, or the path to Sudan, or the border between Sudan and Western Tigray, has been blocked. Factually, it is correct. Politically speaking, its implication is quite different, because they need the Western Front not only for humanitarian assistance and getting the necessary basic equipment and humanitarian help through Sudan, but they also need that for as a military strategy for offensive purposes. And they have been doing that, and they are adamant to control that area. So from the humanitarian perspective, that is true, and what has been provided is not sufficient. And even the level of mobilization and coordination among the international community, especially following the outbreak of war in Ukraine, has dissipated, I would say. There are so many reasons for that. We may discuss about that, but generally there has been some improvements, but close to almost 3 million people. I mean, 40% of the Tigrayan population are not getting the humanitarian support that they need most. So yeah, I agree with you partly, but that narrative has to be carefully unpacked, Dr. Abdullah.
I think some of the source also came from not only like from World Health Organization, but also from World Food Organization as well. So the food is also a big problem area, not only health, but also the food as well. And it looks like, I think we are talking about there are like, you need 174 like convoy every single day to feed those people. And those things are not happening. And, it's like cumulative effect. At the end, people will die. And we are talking
But the people, sorry, but yeah, wait, I'm sorry to intervene.
No.
When we talk about the humanitarian crisis in the region, and again, there is one factual issues we need to make clear from the outset. The humanitarian crisis is very tough. It's so very serious because of, a number of factors. Before the outbreak of the war, the Tigray region was already prone to some drought, crop failure, and also the locust invasion. Okay. And even before that, most of the people used to be living on some form of aid as compared to the rest of the country. And since July 2021, last year, almost for the last 10 months, the conflict has spread, as you may know, to the other regions as well, to the Amhara and Afar region, which means the adjacent regions. Okay, so when we talk about the massive humanitarian assistance that is needed to reach for the needy on the ground, we have to also consider that it is not only about Tigray, even though the degree is higher because of the underlying causes and the siege we just mentioned. But we have to keep in mind that the crisis is not only confined to the Tigray region, and it is a pervasive problem. And it permeates throughout the northern part of Ethiopia. That's what the point I just would like to make, Dr. Abdullah.
But I mean, what's your take? Like, if the current status quo continues, because if it continues, that means things will get worse. So at one point, I mean, what's the tipping point here when you think that, got to do something?
Yeah, and as you have rightly noted, if the current situation continues, and also if I'm saying that all relevant stakeholders fail to take necessary steps and measures, commensurate measures to alleviate the humanitarian crisis, then things will be worsened and it will exacerbate the humanitarian problem that goes without saying. We all know that. But let's unpack what are at stake. First and foremost, we have to address the humanitarian, this catastrophic humanitarian crisis, which is bedeviling not only Ethiopia but the Horn of Africa. Almost, if we take the drought, which is already exacerbating the situation on the ground, even not only in the north, in some parts of Oromia and the Somali region. And if you take all those together, the number of people who needs a direct assistance on a daily basis, like a famine-like condition, is close to 35 million, a population which is bigger than any sizable country, like let's say Ghana. The population of Ghana is only 31 million. So the entire population, which is greater than, the entire population of a sovereign country is at risk of perishing. So this is what is at stake, the first step. And then if we do not seize this opportunity, I would say this window of opportunity to try to build a confidence building measures and establish some trust, a broken trust, and then start some kind of rapprochement between not two warring parties, because there are a lot of regional actors there as well, and regional militias, and the federal government, the TPLF, or as they call themselves, the TDF force, and the Eritrean forces, as we have discussed on some of our previous episodes. We need to consider all these stakeholders if we have to have any lasting peace, if there is any. So these are the two things. The first one is the humanitarian crisis, where millions of people will perish in the daylight while we all are watching. Because for me, as we said, that my guiding principle is do no harm, and all the Ethiopian people are my people. Okay. So I am concerned about the people, not about the political implication. And then, of course, if some sort of peace can be achieved in the near future, that is the greatest achievement. But for me, the first agenda is to alleviate the humanitarian crisis, and then build on that and try to bring the parties together and redouble our efforts on the ongoing mediation, which has been stalled for some time. That is my take on the issue, Dr. Abdullah.
I'm just like trying to touch a bit on the historical kind of side of the story, because Ethiopia is one of those countries in the Horn of Africa suffered seriously in terms of famine, and it's like 1980s. So like lots of people who are still alive, had those very vivid memory. Perhaps your parents had those memories about that famine. I mean, can you give us some kind of insight, like what really happened? Like what was the cause of that famine? And can you just try to see, like, I mean, whether this kind of situation can actually trigger similar kind of situation again?
That is a very interesting point. Again, I mean, you made a very quite excellent observation here, because if you just sit back and try to draw some historical analogy between the two crises, greatest humanitarian crisis, not only in Ethiopia but even in the Horn of Africa, maybe even in the world, there are, among others, two main factors which contributed to the famine of the 1984-1985 famine in Ethiopia, which claimed the life of millions of Ethiopian people and displaced quite a lot of millions of people. And still, some of the people in the Tigray region, generally in the northern part of that country, like if the parents have suffered in 1984-85, now their children are suffering the same, in the same place, and with the same cause, but with the difference in timeline. That was in 1984-85. This one is in 2021, 2022. And as to the causes, there are two major causes, as I said, not the only causes, but main causes. One is political, the other one is natural disaster. The natural disaster is mainly about drought, and even even in regard to drought, we can make some arguments. You know that if you bring in the Amartya Sen's thesis that if there were opportunities and good governance, then we wouldn't have seen famine. Drought is possible, but famine, you can avoid it, right? So still, we can bring freedom as development, or development as freedom. So even when we talk about drought or that famine, I mean the famine which was caused by drought, which is claimed to us being caused by drought, it would have been, at least its effects would have been avoided. If not, it could have been mitigated. But that said, be that as it may, the second and the most egregious causes of that famine and the famine of 2021 is a political crisis. Okay, political crisis is most of the population around that area, the northern part of the country, has to mobilize for a war. They are not producing, and on top of that, as I've tried to mention at the beginning, that there were drought, recurring drought, and then a locust invasion. And those people had been already on aid, international and local aid. Then with those underlying conditions, now we have a full-fledged civil war where you cannot even make a distinction between, make a line between a professional soldiers who are fighting and the civilians who are suffering and fighting at the same time, because it was a civil war for me. There is no question about that. And then the ugly aspect of it was an ethnic war, as we have discussed before. So all this, I mean, crises are mainly for me a man-made. And when I say man-made, it was a political crisis which led to a confrontation, and then the civilians are suffering. The civilians are suffering in every aspect. They are suffering from the war, and they are suffering from the humanitarian crisis. So these are the two main factors which was there in 1984, 1985, and replicating. Like if you are doing some kind of data, I would say there is a possibility of replicating the data of 1984 and use it for 2021 and 2022. Of course, there are some differences. As I said, geopolitics has changed, and the population has increased. Even the local politics is somehow, some arrangement is different, but the underlying causes and the factors still remain the same. So this is my observation. And yeah, yes, you are right that there are there are striking similarities between the two crises, Dr. Abdullah.
So if we see two actors, the two main actors, the central government and the Tigrayan. So both parties are armed, and both parties have got political power as well. Both parties have got powerful allies as well. So you mentioned about Sudan is kind of Tigrayan kind of way out, but also
it's a gateway. Yeah, it is a gateway.
But also Eritrea, Somalia, and I think the Djibouti is very small, so not much role they're playing here. So it looks like they're, I mean, what's happening there. I mean, someone has got more power than the other.
Yeah, someone has got more power in some respects, but the other, that very force or power is counterbalanced through alliances you mentioned. And there are some informal alliances. So the TPLF has its own enablers, even though the claim is that they are sieged. And because, look, there is a proxy war being fought. To some extent, there is an observation, especially during the outbreak of the war around the end of 2020. Egypt was actively involved in the first phase of the filling of the George, the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Now that issue has subsided somehow, but during the height of the war, the civil war, there was some kind of both diplomatic and technical support for the TPLF, which is undeniable, or at least they benefit from the outcome of the war. And then there were some border clash between Sudan and Ethiopia, if you may recall, at the same time, where the Sudanese army has crossed the border and they occupied some area called Al-Fashqa. And they have been there since then. And on the border between Ethiopia and South Sudan, there were infiltrations through one of the Ethiopian region which borders Sudan, which is Benishangul region. And that region is unstable for the last 3 years, and it is still unstable and prone to foreign interventions. And then, of course, the main actor here is Eritrea, which is allied with the federal forces. The role of Somalia is negligible. Even people just mentioned Somalia. There is no hard evidence. There are some rumors and accusations, but there are no hard evidence to say that Somalia is directly involved. I mean, when we say Somalia, there is Somaliland, and then there is the other Somalia. So Eritrea, definitely. Then regional forces now, especially after the occupation of the Amhara and Afar region, because the regional forces are fighting against the TPLF. As I said, they call themselves the TDF, the Tigrayan Defense Force. So there are a lot of actors with different interests, and then those forces, those formidable forces, seemingly formidable forces, are counterbalanced by different alliances, and which are also, of course, evolving and shifting from time to time. Yes. So the role of the superpowers, international community, I think we have discussed about that in one of the episodes.
Yeah.
It's not highly pronounced these days, mainly owing to the reasons that they are busy somewhere else, somewhere else in Ukraine. So now all the effort is, and of course the diplomatic pressures are there in Europe. And so, yeah, I mean, these are the scenario. And of course, these alliances and power aggrandizement is changing from time to time, but the main forces are still there. Even there is a possibility of a new cycle of war, which is highly anticipated.
In our previous talks, I mean, we did not cover that much on Sudan and South Sudan, but also obviously these two countries are extremely poor countries as well. But it looks like, this Sudan and Tigrayan, this some kind of, collusion is problematic. It looks like, other people are seeing it as not coalition, as more kind of collusion, some kind of sinister kind of things going up, trying to harm, Ethiopia, in a bigger way. But at the same time, if you talk about material aspect of the situation, I mean, Sudan, South Sudan are struggling themselves. They have got serious problem in their own countries as well. So I'm just seeing like whether, the way the TPLF or this Tigrayan regions are portrayed, that they are, very, very powerful group, they are trying to, take over things. I mean, it's like for someone who's outsider, know nothing about, Ethiopia's long-term historical background, it's difficult to, to take that position that, yeah, they are the problem, not the other groups who seem are more or less everything.
For me, yeah, that's true. I mean, the Ethiopian history is complex, and it's not quite easy. I mean, let alone for the outsider, even for us, or even for those prolific commentators to say XYZ is a problem, and then therefore X is responsible for this, and Y is innocent, or one is victim, and then the other one is the aggressor or the perpetrator. It is not like that. I mean, the short answer is that there is no innocent actor in this war. No one is innocent. And we all have failed, and we have failed collectively. We have failed our people, we have failed our country, or maybe even we have failed the Horn of Africa. Okay. So if there is a blame, it is a collective blame, both, I mean, politically speaking. And but once we start attributing, the responsibilities, then there will be a shade of grace and then degree to what extent a specific group is responsible for, and for what atrocities, for example. And then that is mainly the issue of international law, where, I mean, provided that we have a tribunal, sufficient evidence about ethnic cleansing, all the international crimes which have been committed, alleged to have been committed, as reported by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, like in November of 2021, and again a couple of months ago. There are surmountable evidence, okay? There are strong evidences which indicate both parties. And it's even difficult for me to say both, because as I mentioned, it is all parties, okay? For all parties that they have committed serious crimes. But when it comes to even Sudan, the point which you have mentioned, Sudan has nothing to gain now. I mean, Sudan, when I say Sudan, the Republic of Sudan, South Sudan, I mean, North Sudan. For South Sudan, they have got their own problem. Even their statehood, as you know that, because you are an expert in this field, it is an infant state, or it's a very young state, if they have ever been a state, okay? Because to be state, then you have to effective control, stability, and all those things. Whether they have that or not is the issue which has to be settled by international lawyers. But still, South Sudan has never been stable. And in addition to that, the parent state, even the North Sudan, was also experiencing instability. Like last year, if you remember, the coup d'etat. And they haven't found a lasting solution for their own problem. So if you see the Horn of Africa, I would like to put it in quotation, not to be misquoted. It is not a jealousy between blind people. Like one is one-eyed and the other person is totally blind. And the poor people, like equality in poverty. When you are sharing poverty, when you are sharing misery, okay? Where no one is better than the rest, except Kenya, which is more stable. Somehow, all the countries in the Horn of Africa, those including micro-states, they have their own, I mean, not like one, a lot of domestic problems, including security and economic issues, and of course, the regional cooperation. So for me, if you ask me about Sudan, Sudan has nothing, especially now. North Sudan has nothing to benefit. The issue about the border, it could be resolved, and they have tried to resolve it in the past, and still war has never been an option, unless, as you said, you wanted to be opportunistic and doing that sinister strategy of exploiting, okay, the crack. But other than that, especially after the issue of GERD is off the table, as I said, okay, about the issue of dam is off the table. Playing the card of war by proxy is not effective, and they have nothing to gain. And actually, there is some kind of discussion between the two, I mean, between the Ethiopian government and the Sudan for the exportation of electricity in the future. So that is my observation on Sudan, and that is the issue stands as it is, but still we can make some kind of projection and what will happen, who is going to benefit, and then if there is any winner in a civil war, then what comes next, then we can discuss about that issues. But for now, these are the scenario.
Like just one pertinent question will be like, because I mean, one thing, whenever I try to research on this area, because I mean, it's such a divisive war. Civil war is always very divisive. So it just like depends on from which side you are watching it. Because my problem is, it looks like the problem is like, these two parties, the central government and the TPLF. So these two regions, they are the main problem area. And these two groups have to find some kind of way out from this deadlock situation, which is also attracting other actors on the ground and, creating other problems for us. But I'm like more focused on like these two groups. Because when people talk about, oh, Somalia is doing problem, Eritrea is doing problem, but at the end of the day, this is Ethiopia's, their country's problem. And these are the people, their people. So they have to find peace among themselves first, and then we can talk about the other things. But whenever people want to talk about these two things, they always try to, go to like other places. And that really worries me. Like, I mean, it's a kind of almost taboo thing to have a discussion with like, these two parties, why they're not discussing, why they're not, come to a term where both can actually live with some kind of reasonable accommodation. So those dialogues are not there.
Yeah, I mean, they are not speaking. They are not engaging in a purposive and a sustained dialogue, which is intended to bring about a lasting peace, both in Ethiopia and then, of course, to the rest of the region. And I agree with you that it is a Ethiopian problem. Okay, it is a domestic problem, but with implications, with a ramification for the region. It is like when your household is not at peace, then your neighbors will never be at peace. Okay. So the problem is the household, within the household. It is Ethiopian problem, which is transpiring to the greater Horn of Africa. Why is that? We can provide a couple of reasons. One and of course, the first obvious reason is Ethiopia used to be a net security exporter. You may remember in the past, before we engulfed ourselves in this never-ending and full-fledged civil war, ethnic war. Ethiopia used to be a security guarantor, both in the region and as it has been, as it was witnessed in the peacekeeping missions throughout the UN history. Okay, starting with 1950s, fighting alongside in Korea, in the War of Korea, we're there, one of the heroes. But now in Congo, we're there. Even in Somalia, somehow we're there. The Somalia case is a bit different for our, not purely for peacekeeping, but in any case, I mean, Ethiopia used to be a net exporter, but now we cannot even fix our own problem, so that we are attracting and being a battleground for so many different actors to exploit. So I agree with you. So that is one of the reasons. But the second reason is the region is, as we said, the border is porous and the region is extremely unstable, the region itself. So if you add Ethiopia on top of the pre-existing, the raging fire in the region, it's very difficult to stop, okay, to extinguish the fire. So this is the other reason. And then the third reason is the identity aspect of the war, okay, the ethnic aspect of the war. Once you engage in an ethnic war, whereby the bondage of ethnicity and at times religion as well, sometimes crosses border, I mean, the so-called nation states border, then there is a spillover. And there is solidarity, the war of solidarity, where you provide some support for your group based on either ideological reasons, which is religion, or based on ethnic identity. So there could be other reasons, including economic integration and the issue of migration as well. If you see the Horn of Africa, most of, especially in Africa generally, close to 80% of migrations are called internal migration. It's not to Europe, as people tend to portray. 80% of African migrations are intra, not inter, within Africa. It means like Ethiopia exporting a lot of its refugees to Sudan and neighboring countries, and then when the other country caught on fire, then they will also send a huge number of refugees in thousands, if not millions. So I'm just giving you that, like, there are layers of reason. Could be now, I've already mentioned almost 5 of the major reasons.
I mean, just like just side question. Am I right to say that, I mean, so when you talk about the bigger picture, this bigger region, Horn of Africa, or like, surrounding countries, somehow they're all connected, isn't it? Historically, people have got relatives there, some kind of ancestors there, here. Do you think it's quite common?
It is quite common. And if for example, we take even the example of Ethiopia and we extend it a bit further into history, look, Djibouti used to be 100 years ago part of Ethiopia. I mean, the Ethiopian Empire. I'm referring to the empire. Eritrea was part of Ethiopia. And then some borders which are artificial borders, and then even between Ethiopia and Kenya, somehow it's settled. Still, there are contestations. With Somalia, there are contestations. Between Djibouti and Eritrea, there are contestations and claims and counterclaims. And then most of the people, even ethnically speaking, now we share a lot of ethnic groups between Djibouti and Ethiopia through Afar people, the Somali people. And by the way, the president of Djibouti was born in my city, you know that, in Redwa. Ismail Mergele is born in Ethiopia, in Redwa, from one of our cities. I mean, the level of connectedness goes to this extent. So when one is affected, and both at personal level, at the country level, or even ethnically or geopolitically speaking, then the other will be affected. So then there is a connection between Eritrea, and then there is some issue between Eritrea and Sudan historically, both in terms of some clan issues and religion and ideology. Then between Tigray and Eritrea, they're the same people. Now it brings us to the main issue, the sticking point. Between Tigray, what's the difference? They're the same people speaking the same language, used to be part of Ethiopia. They fought together to topple the Ethiopian dictator, the Derg regime, and then they started falling out. I mean, so if you go through all this line and this story I was providing you, there are so many interconnectedness in terms of geography, in terms of history, in terms of identity, or even in terms of common destiny. But are we capitalizing on our on assets, common assets, social assets? No, we are not. Are we learning from history? Not at all. Maybe we are repeating it in exactly the same way, like we discussed about the two famines, the tale of the two famines. So there are so many interconnectedness, shared memory, history, and of course, if we come to terms and just basic common sense is not so common these days, as you know. But if we use our common senses, we also have a common destiny, which I'm afraid we are not looking at, especially the politicians. They don't really care about envisioning the future, which encapsulates all these factors and thinking of security and peace at a regional level. There are some structures, including IGAD, but when you practically speaking, I don't see any significant change in this regard.
Then what's the solution? I mean, how this will end? What's the conclusion here? Where we are heading for? Is there any, like, can you see any light at the end? It looks like, so someone is talking about, oh, this is just internal, some kind of law and order situation. And then other people are saying that, no, this is a full-fledged war. And then some other people say, no, it's like regional war. And then all those other things are there as well. Do you think that the knowledge about this war is quite, I mean, I'm not sure like what's the right word. It's very pernicious. I mean, you just cannot pinpoint it. You just cannot say that, oh, do you know what? This is the war. This is the people. This is the people need to work together. This is the people, get together and talk about, what the problem is, and then, what they want, and then let's have a discussion on that. It's lots of, unknown here, lots of unknown. And I think that's problematic here.
It is. It definitely is, because if there is an easy solution or answer, we wouldn't have been here or having 3 or 4 episodes. And even like for 2 of us, if there was an easy answer, then there is no need to have a dialogue and discussion every time. And then, yes, it is very difficult because there are a lot of unknowns, assumptions, predictions, and the dynamic of the war is changing. It is changing because of layer of factors which are contributing to what's really going on the ground. International communities and international actors, the superpowers have an interest. Then the Gulf region, because we have regional actors as well. The world we live in is Dr. Abdullah, as you know, is no more bipolar or whatever polar. It is complex, or at least multiplex. Because we should not neglect the regional powers. Okay, there are regional powers in the Gulf region. Even in the Horn of Africa, there are a competition for hegemony. There are a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of issues. There are even sticking issues within Ethiopia. I will come to that as to the solutions. What needs to be addressed, at least for the time being, if we can talk about the broader picture. But as long as, the easy answer would be, as long as politics, there is no solution, okay? As long as we have politics, we will have problems, okay? Where there is a politics, there is a problem. But at the same time, politics could be a solution. The politics, which is people-centered, which is out of people and for the people, and which can be the machinery, which can be run by the people, then there is hope. But as elsewhere, the commonality of the politics is usually it is wielded by the few elites and present it as if it is an existential threat. And then who are suffering? The people, the soldiers, the people on the ground. But even then, if there is a will, like some level of will, and if they put some considerations, and if they put people first, then there is a possibility of dialogue. So what I see is that there is at least a humanitarian truce on the ground. They have been somehow violating, both parties have been violating it, but still it is in place. So if we use the humanitarian truce as a confidence building mechanism, and then if we bring in civil society, which is absent, totally absent in the Ethiopian context, including the role of religious institutions, okay, activists, then, and even the role of women, which is not seen anywhere. Generally, civil societies and those people who make a difference, those entities who can bring about some change, then I can see some light as the end of the tunnel. So the second point is the commitment from the international community. I'm not accusing the international community as such, because they have been putting a lot of pressure, even the United States itself, with all the reservations and the limitations, and they have been trying to convince and also pressure the parties to come to a negotiation table, and especially somehow to restrain Eritrea from engaging, because it makes very difficult. The war is not like bilateral; it is tripartite, and then, as we said, it complicated the resolution of the conflict. So the second possibility or prospect is to continue a sustained, coordinated pressure, diplomatic pressure, and to engage with all the parties and give them some forms of incentives at the same time. And I mean, a carrot and a stick still works. So not to lose sight of what is going on in Ethiopia, even though it is understandable that the war in Ukraine is for all practical reasons is a top priority for the international community. I don't want to engage into the reasons and the nuances, but still, you know, the international community has to focus. At least they need to build on what has already been achieved. So this is as the third possibilities. I mean, the reason to be optimistic. And finally, I would just like to call upon all the stakeholders, both regional, international, and domestically, to give peace a chance now. Let's give peace a chance. Now we have already suffered a lot, and there is nothing we can suffer other than a state collapse. What I can see, finally, Dr. Abdullah, is that the very existence, I'm not trying to be alarmist, but for me, the very existence of the Ethiopian state, as we know it now, hangs in balance. It depends on how we manage this conflict. If we cannot resolve this conflict, we go down, and when we go down together. And then it will be too late and too little for all of us, for all those stakeholders I just mentioned, to mend or change the course of action. Yeah. So these are the like, it is a mixed. I know it is a mixed answer, both the solutions and then the problems. But this is how I can see the problem and the possibilities out there.
And especially when you mentioned that, you know, this is the window of opportunity, isn't it? There's some kind of ceasefire there, some kind of, you know, understanding that we'll not fight because things are really bad. So need to take care of some of the humanitarian issues because these are serious priority. Or
actually, sorry, yeah, it is a humanitarian truce. That's what they call it, humanitarian truce. Not even a comprehensive ceasefire yet. But what's prompted both parties, either the whether it is unilateral or bilateral, okay, understanding, is partly because of the painful nature of the war. Now they know no one is a winner. This is very important point. Very, very important. They know that it is a civil war. It is even a regional war with a multitude of actors there with their own respective interests. And now they came to terms, even though they don't want to make it public or appear as being weak. Deep inside, they all know that there is no winner, because they have tried. They gave chance more than necessary. And now we have seen, both in terms of military confrontation, in terms of political leverage, and in terms of humanitarian crisis, they know that there is no winner. There is at least ultimate or net winner in this civil war. So yeah, this is one of the points that we should have mentioned. So thank you for bringing it back.
Like, just one more thing, like, I mean, the main focus of our talk is that particular region, who is now, you know, facing some serious humanitarian situation. So if things go wrong, that means that region, the people from that region will die. Okay. And if that happens, I'm trying to portray a very worst situation, worst scenario. If that happens, then I'm like pretty confident that the world community will blame the Ethiopian central government. And for that reason, I don't think the central government can sustain their power longer, because then, you know, we call it CNN effect. Everyone will withdraw their support from that guy. So even for his own interest, you see, he has to do something here. He cannot push that far. If he does that, then that will not bring him down, but the whole thing can actually, you know, in a like serious situation, the whole apparatus, the elites we are talking about.
Yeah, again, that is a very that's a very good way to see the problem or the situation. I can say that the center could no longer hold the crumbling economy. Okay, the economy is faltering, even in the absence of sanctions, even in the absence of mounting sanctions. The economy is suffering. Inflation is skyrocketed. Access to foreign loans and grants are limited, and the conditions, if it is conditioned upon, of course, accepting a negotiated ceasefire, and of course eventually end the war. And to some extent, the pressure has been working, especially the the American HR 6600 and other S3199. Those two bills have brought about a significant change, because the government started to heat. Now the government was not budging at all. Now they were talking about the language of peace. Okay, that language of peace was hardly won. So there was that rapprochement, including the truce. So the truce was not as such from a moralistic consideration. It was because of the huge pressure from the international community. So, but at the same time, when we talk about sanctions, time and again, as we have seen as in history, sanction usually hit a wrong target. Okay, even the smart sanctions, when we talk about smart sanctions, and the question would be, how smart is a smart sanction itself? So these concerns are there. I mean, serious concerns are there, but still there is no better option other than engaging with the government and putting some pressure. So can the center hold? No, no more, because there is domestic politics. The domestic politics is changing, and now the election is over. The government, I mean, the government of Abiy, he thought that it is in his best interest to wage war, at least to sustain the war until the election is over. If the war was not actually prompted by the consideration of the upcoming election. So if you go deeper, but in any case, the domestic politics is changing, the economy is crumbling. So there are some pressures from the people, including myself here. Now the war is over. I mean, there is no if and buts now. It's just the only solution is to end the war and sit on the negotiation table and save the country, and of course save themselves in the process, but save the country and save the region as well. That is how I see the current problem. Yes, I agree with you that the central government cannot control and dictate everything, at least not anymore for me. That is my observation. But Some other people would disagree,
Mm.
but that is my stance, and that is the way I approach the problem.
Politics is a funny game, that the guy who won the Nobel Peace Prize, same guy can, ended up with in the International Criminal Court for, crime against humanity or war crime. And obviously, so if this guy is very ambitious or, whatever the other groups are saying, this guy is megalomaniac. But if he even thinks about himself, his future, his political status, he has to be very careful as well.
I agree with you that he needs to be careful when we talk about at the level of individual analysis. Okay, we are coming to the leader from the international level, then to the country, to the leader himself. Yes, there are so many claims and talks about his leadership style, his capability, his understanding of international and regional politics, even the Ethiopian history itself. Whether he's learning from the recent, even the most recent Ethiopian history, including the 1980s and 1970s, or whether he really thinks that he's going to be the winner in this civil war, or stay in power for some time, that remains to be seen. But for me, that is being naive, to say the least. There is no such a possibility. So, I mean, this guy, as to the Nobel Peace Prize, it is, if we have to blame, partly it is international community and those people who awarded that Nobel Peace prematurely. It was premature for me. It was so premature that they will regret, and I don't know whether they will regret or not. Even actually, it was politically motivated. It was politically motivated. There were a lot of homeworks that needed to be done. And then even the so-called peace. So let's just leave all other things aside and accept everything. Let's accept the facts. Let's say that the Nobel Peace Prize was deserved indeed. But then which peace? Okay, the peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia, right? And so the peace for what end? To alienate the other power and wage a war against their erstwhile enemy or friend? Is that peace? What kind of peace? What sort of peace is that? I mean, just like by taking everything for granted, even talking about the peace, there have never been a peace. It was a temporary game and alliance between two of them, President Isaias and Abiy, to bide their time. I would say to bide their time and bite when the time is ripe. That's all. So, I mean, that is all I can say.
And can I ask another very curious question? Is Eritrean president, is he also an army officer, background army officer?
Yes, he is. He is. Yes, he's fought for half of his life, because he liberated, together with his comrades, he liberated the Eritrean people, we would say, and Eritrean territory. So he was one of the architects, and still he is. Yes, the short answer is that he was one of the main architects of the Eritrean nationalism, and then, of course, he's responsible for both. He's responsible for liberating Eritrea. I don't want to second guess it if it is called liberation or freedom. At the same time, he's the one who is plunging Eritrea and alienating and isolating the entire region, I mean, country, from the rest of the world. Yeah.
But by profession, he was an army personnel.
Yeah, I mean, he was in the army. Whether he was fighting like a general or not is another issue, but he was in the army. He was in the EPLF, Eritrean People's Liberation Front. He was there. He was a leader. Yeah, so, but I don't know how many soldiers he shot down.
I mean, my own experience is just for the world, army officers are not good politicians. They don't understand politics. They're trained
except for quite few.
I mean, I kind of totally disagree.
when I was talking about, except for quite few. History is always written by the victors, not made by the victors, but written at least by the victors. So if we see, I mean, the famous claim is that Winston Churchill and General Eisenhower, the two.
Just like for the future generation, you know, if an army officer, you know, want to be president or prime minister, you know, don't vote for these people. You know, these people are dangerous people. I don't know, like the army thing, the whole thing is like built on, you know, fear, security, war. These are the things which destroyed our humanity. These are the things which created division throughout the history, you know, from crusade to, you know, 100 years war, 30 years war. It's just war after war. And then, you know, the Napoleon, you know, I mean, where to stop? I mean,
but so, yeah, generally speaking, and I mean, your argument makes sense, strong sense, actually. Even if we come up with just like a handful of people, even if we engage in such a discussion, is still, as experience has shown us, including the most recent ones, those people who are engaged in the army, they have to, I mean, they have those deep insecurity, okay? For army to exist, for them to exist, there should be a war, okay? Perpetual fear, at least, or cycle of violence. And even when they are lucky enough to hold a political power, they always have a backup. Okay? If things go well, they are civilian, but when things are not going in their favor, as you said, then they will come up with their plan B, which is clinging to their usual military might and the only language they know. Actually, I mean the language they can speak well. So, I mean, as much as possible, it is always good, and if possible, to keep them 100 miles away, even from a palace, 100 miles away.
We have got this idea about, you know, glorifying the people, the nation, the imaginary, you know, idea about us. I mean, it just
you actually finally you just reminded me of one famous saying, which is that all army generals want to be a president and set a wrong precedent.
That's a good one, yeah. But I mean, I will stop here. I think a couple of good things to take away from our talk. That one thing is there is some kind of, you know, cessation of violence, you know, some kind of, we can call it negative peace, some kind of peace there, okay? People are not shooting straight away right now. There's some kind of understanding there, you know, things are really bad now. We need to be very careful. So that's good. And hope, you know, that creates some kind of momentum for talk. Because I mean, that's the thing, if you look at the Ukraine situation, you know, suddenly there's a total, you know, no connection, no interaction, no any kind of, you know, even like say hello, you know, just call. I mean, Ukraine is not far away from Russia, you know, from Kiev to Moscow. It's just one phone call, you know. Just if you don't want to make a phone call, send a text. I mean, text message. I mean, these are not tough things, but suddenly we feel that, you know, I just cannot talk to this guy anymore because, you know what, I really want to punish this guy. And the other guy is also thinking the same way.
You know, I'm sorry, yeah, again, you know, well, one of the things which irritates me as a takeaway as well, even when it comes to the war in Ethiopia, it always, I mean, the mega narrative, the grand narrative goes like this. How can I talk to my enemy? How could I talk to a terrorist? Then my question, and any sensible person will pose a similar question saying, if you don't talk to your enemy, so who else are you talking to? If you don't talk to your enemy, if you don't talk to terrorists, and I mean, what kind of talk are you talking about to begin with? We always need to talk to our enemy first and foremost. I mean, if we are friends, there is no need actually to negotiate every time. So, I mean, you are right. Even in the Ethiopian context, people always conflate this thing, which is illogical. I mean, from the logical point of view, we need to talk to our enemies, not to our friends. To our friends, we just need conversation, like life as normal. Just division of labor, maybe. But you have to seriously talk to your enemies, and you have to negotiate with your enemies. That is a very idea of negotiation. That is why we have and why we establish diplomatic practices. So I mean, I'm just saying this wrong narrative, like saying I cannot talk to this enemy because they are sworn enemies, they are intransigent and whatever. If there is a willingness, if there is a will and a commitment, and if you believe in talk, in the fact that negotiation, I mean, talk will lead to confidence building and then some sort of trust and then negotiated settlement. I think the starting point is to talk, just simply to talk to each other. Yeah.
I mean, if you keep like one example, like during the like Bosnian War, the Dayton Agreement happens after 5 years. Okay. But that same agreement could have happened like, at the beginning of the war as well.
Exactly. You know what, so again, because now my mom was used to tell me this short, it's not story. So whenever she wanted me to do something, okay, she usually tells me that don't force me to do the same things that you would have done without being beaten up. Okay. If I beat you, you are going to do it. Okay. So why don't you do it without the same logic? I mean, yeah. It would have been like I would have avoided pain, like I would have avoided pain. Our relationship would have been better if I just comply saying, okay, I will do it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do it after huge cost and loss. Yeah.
Because I mean, there's no winner here. And war is always, the worst thing to happen in your life. So don't encourage it. Don't go for it. Don't participate in it. Don't, fund it.
Yeah, just say to war in every possible mechanism. Use all opportunities. Say no to war. In what way? In every possible ways. Just say no to war. That is my final word.
So I mean, thank you. I mean, you made some time for me, and then I always love to come back to you because this is kind of thing I really want to talk. And it kind of is. I mean, I think we are an academic. Also, it's kind of I feel it kind of my duty as well because this is part of the education, isn't it? These are the part of our fabric of this planet's existence as well. So the planet cannot live without Ethiopia. Planet cannot live without Ukraine. Planet cannot live with like Bangladesh or the USA or the UK. But everyone can live in that planet. Everyone can actually embrace everyone with goodwill, compassion, and kindness.
Yeah. I can't agree more with you, Dr. Abdullah. And it has always been a pleasure to have a discussion with you. So I hope we had some good conversation, and I hope we'll get to talk about more issues as it unfolds in the future. Yeah, but thank you very much, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Je peux vous le rendre, Seigneur, Seigneur, car avec les soldats, il est